going to start with a former colleague of mine, Cynthia Hansen. Cynthia is the managing director of the Innovation Foundation. And it's one place that actually, if you wonder what it does, it's all in the name. It's a foundation, meaning it's a non-for-profit, and it focuses on innovation. For the details, we're going to ask Cynthia to come up on the stage and tell us more about that. But just maybe a brief introduction about Cynthia herself. I know Cynthia from before she was at the Innovation Foundation. That, by the way, is part of Adecco, that very large workplace solutions. Is that how you call it? Workplace solutions company based in Zurich. And before that, she was with me at the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And she did many different things there. Professional services, strategic partnerships, content strategy, I think you even did. So she really did many different things there over the course of a decade. Before that, she worked at the State Department in the United States. She was a consultant, so somebody who really has a very, very big experience, broad experience, and in many different countries. She studied at LSE, the London School of Economics, where she did NGO management. And before that, she studied in Japan, is that right?
I taught in Japan.
So we're going to ask you all about that. At Puget University, correct? And she's here now today with us. So I want to ask to give a very warm welcome to Cynthia, our first speaker at this year's Learning from Leaders. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Good to see you. And I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions in this chair in a minute. But first, the floor is yours to tell us about the Innovation Foundation.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you today. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of nexus. Do you know what nexus means? So nexus is a place where things overlap or where there's a connection. And what interests me about that is the interesting things that happen when you have unexpected connections. And so a huge amount of what we do at the Innovation Foundation is based on what happens when you put together different people with different perspectives, what happens when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and you just put the right ingredients together and you see what happens. You have to give some structure to it, put some guardrails on it, but that's what's really exciting. But we didn't do this overnight. So just to let you know a bit of background, the Innovation Foundation is, as Peter said, the global corporate foundation of the Adecco Group. And we started off in 2017 as really an aggregator. We were put together first to take some programs and projects out of the group and put them under one umbrella so that they could drive synergy. That worked to some extent. We stitched these things together, but very quickly we started up the Social Innovation Lab, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. But we grew organically, so more things were taken out of the group and put into the foundation, up to the point where we're managing a very large portfolio that was pulling in a lot of different directions. And the tipping point was really when we had a change of chairman. So this is where it's really important, back to nexus. What's the combination of the interests of the group, the interests of society, the things that are working, the things that are not working, the megatrends out there in the world? What happens when those all crash together? And it was really that moment of the change of leadership in the group and in the foundation that let us do something extraordinary. So we did a review with the board and the chairman, and we decided to take a very brave step. We decided to actually move away from all of the legacy programs and projects and to narrow down the focus to something very crisp and very approachable. So we narrowed the focus to just employability and access to labor markets for underserved populations. So people who are falling out of the workforce or in danger of falling out of the workforce. And we agreed to only work as the Social Innovation Lab, and I'll show you in a minute what that means. So we spent all of 2021 basically reshaping the whole organization. We changed the name, the brand, the entire structure, the governance, the board, the funding structure, the staff, and the operating model. So essentially, everything. And then, as of 2022, we were totally new. So we landed on a vision, mission, and values that are very close to the Adecco Group. They're still about the future of work. They're still about making the future work for everyone, but they take a smaller slice. The Adecco Group is about everything related to employment and the life cycle of work for everybody, and our slice is that idea of underserved populations. And how do we do this? So we've created this unique model that we call scan, build, and scale. And this is something that you can actually use in any part of your life. So in simple terms, scan is data-driven landscape scanning. See what the landscape looks like, see what the trends are, who are the actors, and then you look for what problems are bubbling up that no one has solved. And then, once you know what you're trying to crack and for what audience, then you can move to the next step. And build is design thinking-based ideation. So you come up with lots of different ideas, let everything bubble up, and then you've got criteria to narrow down to the things that seem most practical, most plausible, might work. And you set up little tests. Spin up something very small and light and test it. See what works, see what doesn't work. Retool, do it again. And do it enough times that you're pretty certain that you've got a handful of things that you think will work. Then you can go into scale. And scale for us is an accelerator that we built from scratch. So this is where we take ideas and we turn them into real products. So we build a small venture team, 3-4 people, around each idea that we want to take from a basic prototype into a real product. And we give them 6 months, not a lot of time, and a little budget, reasonable budget, and say, go and build an MVP. We want a program that looks roughly like this, that serves, in this case, young mothers in Mexico and helps them to be more work ready. Or we want a tech solution that helps women come back into work after a career break. Or we want a government policy that's going to help people who are over 55 to re-enter work. So it could be lots of different things. In that scale process, we actually turn it into a real product. And then if it gets past that first 6 months, they'll get another 6 months and another bit of budget, and they have to finish the product up to the point where it leaves the foundation. Because we're like a flywheel. So we don't keep anything, and we don't give grants, we don't incubate anybody else's startup, and we don't fund things for the long term. So these things that we build have to be sustainable out there in the real world. So they could be stood up as their own organizations, for-profit or not-for-profit. They could go into a partner organization. For us, it doesn't matter, as long as it is the right vehicle to get that solution into the hands of the people who need it. So we've got 3 live projects, and we can talk about this more. But the first one I mentioned was about young mothers in Mexico. So in this case, we built a social campaign built on the idea of credible information about the world of work and your pathway in it, delivered by someone who looks and sounds like she's from your neighborhood. She's your cousin, she's your sister, she's your neighbor, not someone far away from the government or someone who doesn't understand your reality. And then with that, we built a tech solution that translates the lived experience that young mothers, think teenage mothers, have already, that they could actually turn into skills and competencies for a job. So if you think of a young mother, how does she spend her day? She might do shopping for the family. That means she can balance a budget. She can make trade-offs. She can make decisions. She might take public transportation, so she can decide where she's going, she can navigate, she can figure out how much it's going to cost. She might need to balance childcare, so she can multitask, she can figure out who else can help her. So she's got skills and competencies. She just might not recognize them, and they might not show up on a CV. So our tool actually translates that into a report and ultimately into a CV. So these are the kinds of things we're doing. So think about it more like a venture studio. It's like a venture studio that's just focused on solving problems related to the world of work that are going to create social change. And we've got the advantage of actually sitting within the Adecco Group. We're actually a separate legal organization, but we're completely funded by the Adecco Group. And we have all the access to the skills, the competency, the expertise, the knowledge, the data within the Adecco Group. So the advantage there is we have the ability to scale, and we have the ability to not just shift what's happening in a small community, but build it once and then expand it to other countries, to other geographies, to other target audiences, and that's how we create scale. But it's not just about what we create in the Social Innovation Lab, it's also about how we do it. So when we did this big switch of the whole operating model, we agreed with the board that we would have 2 objectives, just 2 objectives. One is to create the best possible solutions out of the Social Innovation Lab, and then the second one is to share. So this isn't something that we keep to ourselves. We actually open source everything we do. Our methodology, the case studies, how we do it, how we select, the mistakes that we've made, everything, all of the learnings get completely open source so that anyone can take those models, anyone can take the learnings and take it forward. And we firmly believe that this is the way we will create social impact, systems change at scale. So this is what I would love to have the chance to talk some more about with you and with Peter.
That's an absolutely amazing project or projects that you're working on, Cynthia. I want to ask you about that. Before I do a bit of housekeeping for this event and the following ones, I want to let you know, we forgot to tell you this, but of course it's important to turn off your phones. You can, I suppose, put them on airplane mode if you want to take photos or so. Make sure that they're silenced. The second is I got some good news, which is that there will be 2 moments where you can say all you want to all your neighbors, which is we have a break after our second speaker, and we also, this is going to be amazing, we're going to have a reception at the end of the whole conference. And I think Cynthia will join us there, as will our next speakers. That's the good news. The bad news is, this is a wonderful room, full of marble from times gone by, but that also means that it's quite a loud room. So I'm gonna have to ask you, especially the people in the back and up front or on top, try to keep your voices down, because otherwise it's going to be hard for everyone else to listen. And then third, if you do want to say something during the conference itself, I guess there is actually an opportunity, because at the end of every speaker, we get questions from the audience. So make sure to think about what you want to ask now, and I'll come back to the audience in about 20 minutes. That's my housekeeping. Now back to Cynthia and the Innovation Foundation. Cynthia, first a few questions on the Innovation Foundation. I think that most of us will not have heard of the Innovation Foundation. I think, on the other hand, many people will have heard of Adecco. I want to do a quick polling to see who knows Adecco. Adecco? Yeah, so maybe about 20% of people here. Depending on which country you're from, it's actually very prevalent, including, for example, for students. One of the things that Adecco does is provide temporary employment, including for students. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. That is true. So actually, we're one of the 3 largest HR services companies in the world. We're in 60 countries. We've got 38,000 people. And we do offer temporary staffing, but that's only one slice of it. So, for example, I actually worked as an Adecco associate when I was just out of university before I went to grad school, and I needed a summer job. And so I signed up with them as a temporary employment agency, and I ended up answering phones and working for a couple of different companies, and it was a great experience. So it can be an excellent way to get some real-world experience in the world of work.
And in 60 countries around, is there actually anyone who had a similar experience? Has anyone worked as a temporary worker for or through Adecco? Anyone at all? Oh, in the back there. You want to say anything about that experience? You want to stand up and share? What have you done for Adecco? Hello, yeah, sure, why not? We'll see if we can get a microphone over to you. There we go, over there. Let's see if that rings true for you too.
Hi. Okay. I work for Amazon through Adecco. I work for 4.5 months. I visited Adecco office, which is in Munich Central Station, near Munich Central Station. They were actually very good. Then when I went for my appointment, there were 2 ladies in the reception, and they gave me a very good brief about what my work is, what am I going to do in Amazon warehouse. I worked for 4.5 months, and from Adecco, they were very quick at giving responses to my emails and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I got very good feedback from them, and after my work was finished, it's temporary. So they gave me a feedback that they will gonna call me back if they need workforce, and if I need for a full-time job, they're gonna contact me because I gave my CV to them.
Yeah.
If
That's
like-
amazing. You know, I think that, you know, if they don't yet have a PR representative in Munich, maybe we can ask you to become a PR representative for Adecco. But thank you for sharing that experience, and maybe we can get back to you. Thank you. Can back to you later in the session. Now, I have had the same experience. I also worked as a student through Adecco. So my first question for you is this, related to Innovation Foundation. If you have an amazing company that does amazing things like giving jobs to students and to, as you said, women and you know, anyone really in society, why do you need the Innovation Foundation?
So we went, when we set it up, we wanted to look for an unusual model that would provide a different kind of social impact. So you might know that the more traditional approach to a corporate foundation would be to give money to organizations that are doing work already. Sometimes there will be a corporate volunteering aspect to that. But what we were looking at was all of these unsolved problems that companies weren't going to put R&D money into because it wasn't going to make money fast enough. Government often didn't have the money or perhaps the know-how or the reach to do it. NGOs might see the problem but often don't have the resources to do it. So we thought, how could we actually be kind of a neutral platform to bring together all those players and basically put money into R&D that nobody else could do, that actually would have benefit for all of those stakeholders. So that's something that the foundation can do, that the company can't, but is complementary to what the company does.
I think they call that in academic circles sort of these wicked problems, these
Yes.
wicked business problems, things that are very hard to solve, but that can have a solution. It's just very complex and complicated. So now you say why you would do that. And then the next question is, of course, how do you do that? And you told us a little bit about your methodology, but maybe we can do a bit of a deeper dive in one of those examples that you gave. You said we chose Mexico as a country to work with, I believe there, was it?
Young mothers.
With young mothers to reintegrate them into the labor market. So, you know, again, maybe short, why that focus, and then how do you actually go about it?
So often what we're looking at, and this is back to the idea of nexus, is what's the way in, what's the door opener or the wedge, the lever you can use in a small way that will create big impact. So in this case, we started with the topic of youth, and youth is gigantic, right? So we started with youth, and then we have our own methodology where we narrowed down from youth to those who are NEET, which is not in employment, education, or training, living at or below the poverty line, living on the urban fringe, because the needs of people on the urban fringe are often overlooked. You get programs that are for rural or programs that are for urban, but there's kind of this missing slice there. Then we looked at when is the danger zone? So in most countries, you can leave school at age 16. But if you fall out of the whole system between, say, 16 and 24, the chances that you're going to get back in are very low, and the chances that you are going to fulfill your ultimate earning power over the course of your working life are also really low. So basically, if you miss that window, then you're already at a big disadvantage. So then we thought, okay, what is an extreme use case? Because back to the idea of margins and nexuses is if you solve for the needs of the extreme use case, what works for them will work for others.
Right.
So, okay, young mothers are more extreme. They are often socially excluded. They're often at a financial disadvantage. They might not have other kind of safety net around them. And when we found in Mexico, and this is on the outskirts of Mexico City, they were very far from work because a lot of these girls may not have anyone in their immediate surroundings who's in formal work. So if you take kind of an extreme case, then you can work back toward the middle. And we thought with Mexico, that what works in Mexico would work in other middle-income countries, would work potentially in other LATAM countries with some tailoring as well. And then what works for young mothers would work for other mothers, other parents, other people with caring responsibilities, other young people. So the idea is you build it once, and then you can scale it in a bunch of different directions.
That's amazing. Now, so that's a wonderful example of how you then do it and why you do it in that particular case. I guess the next question is from a business point of view, because it's still a business that's, can you say that they're investing Adecco or they are enabling it? How do you call it?
That's a good question. So one of the key caveats of what we do is that we can't be building things directly for the Adecco Group. Because we are a not-for-profit entity, and because ultimately we have to focus on the needs of society, we can't be doing R&D for the group.
Right.
So what we do is we look for things where we can leverage the know-how of the group, but build it actually so that it will go out into the world via someone else. So in the case of the young mothers in Mexico, we built two things. I mentioned a social campaign. In that case, we have now handed over the social campaign to one of the partners with whom we built it. And so this is actually an NGO network called Youth Build, and they are global. So we built with Youth Build Mexico, but then we can scale it through Youth Build. And then we built the tech solution with a tech startup, and then that continues with them as the suite of things that they offer. They are also a social enterprise. So now what we've got is this lovely partnership of Youth Build Mexico and Skill Lab, the tech company. So we have handed over the model to them. They will take it forward. They take the front seat. We take the back seat. After the first year of spinoff, then we won't be funding it anymore, and they will have set it up as a sustainable model, marrying their two business models. And then we'll see where it goes beyond that.
Now, I suppose for those of us who follow a little bit how business interacts with not-for-profit, this is, sort of an eternal discussion. What is the role of not-for-profit for a company, not just legally, but also just in terms of why is it worthwhile for a business, and when does it become really more PR than actually what it is intended to do? So where have you landed on that balance? Is it then that you say these projects ultimately will make business sense, but they will make business sense outside, as you said, of the Adecco Group and outside of the Innovation Foundation? Or do you really not care about whether or not they start to make money at some point?
That's an excellent question, because ultimately it's about sustainability. So it doesn't mean that it has to make money. It just means that it has to be financially sustainable. So in this case, with Skill Lab, because that becomes part of their business model, they can make money from it, and we have no problem with that. With Youth Build Mexico, what they can do is use this as a way to attract more people to their own programs and therefore get more funding through their traditional funding streams. What we're more interested in is how do we take each new project. So you saw on that slide, there was one also about women back to work, one about mature workers. We want to test out different ways of spinning things off. So now we've tried, okay, what happens when you spin it off into an NGO network or into a tech startup? The next one we're trying with Women Back to Work is we will probably stand this up as its own tech startup. So we'll actually set up a company and then see if it can thrive on its own once it's outside the Adecco Group. And it might be that for mature workers, we do something that could be a partnership between an NGO, a government, and a corporate. So we're agnostic as to what form it takes, as long as it actually gets to the people who need it. But we need these use cases.
Right. And so that's what you're working on. I mean, it's endlessly fascinating. I learned already a lot from your presentation and, of course, the questions we went through today. But one of the questions I have for you, Cynthia, is why do you work on these challenges? What brought you to want to solve these kinds of socio-economic global problems? What drives Cynthia Hansen?
I think it's back to that idea of nexus and red thread. So I spent the last 25 years of my career working in different sectors. So working in public-private partnership, I worked for a private consulting firm, I worked in the not-for-profit sector, and then World Economic Forum, which is kind of in between all of those. What I wanted was an opportunity to pull all of those things together. So basically pull the assets, the money, the clout of business with the influence of government, with the grassroots bottom-up understanding of civil society, and be able to play across all of those. So I had a wonderful boss, Piers Cumberledge, you would know him at the farm, who talked about the triathlete is the way of the future. So what you need is people who can easily move across government, business, civil society, academia, who can speak the language, who can bring people in, who can appeal to what people want, and then use that to then create change. And so this is what drives me. It's like, how do you pull all those threads together and use it to make something better than any one actor could do alone? And this, right now, this is my dream job. This is what I love doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and also I love that image, don't you, of the triathlete. So somebody who in their careers will have done different things in different sectors, the public sector, the private sector, NGOs, and so on, government perhaps, and then is able to work on these big systemic challenges that we all know about, but that perhaps at this point in our careers we're like, how do you even get started on solving those things? And clearly you found a way to do that. Now, of course, another aspect of that, if we go back into your career, I suppose, is that at some point, maybe, and it's a question to you, at some point maybe it wasn't so clear what the common thread was. You know, you work in a private consulting firm, you work for the US State Department, you end up with the World Economic Forum, all wonderful things in their own right, but maybe at that point not yet so clear, oh, this is going to come back into being a triathlete, solving systemic challenges. Were you ever worried about that, you know, you didn't know where your career was headed? And then how did you find the comfort and the confidence that, yes, this all makes sense?
There were lots of times when I wasn't sure what was going to happen, which is actually really important learning, I think, for everybody, is you're not locked into what you're doing right now. You can always pivot, you can always change. So I had actually a moment when I had been teaching in Japan on the JET program, and my plan was I was going to go back to the States, I was going to go to grad school, get a PhD, and then teach comparative literature. And I thought I had it all planned out.
That was the plan.
That was my plan.
Long time ago, but
yeah,
that was...
long time ago, that was my plan. I applied to the programs that I wanted, and I didn't get in. And then it was like, oh my God, I have to do something else. And that was actually a great opportunity to then reflect, was that really what I wanted? And would I have been happy? Would I have been productive? Would I have been helping people? So that actually started to craft for me this ability to reflect on what do I like, what do I not like, what works for me, where can I add value? And so what I've tried to do at each time I've done a pivot, whether it was changing countries or changing cities or changing organizations, is to stop and look at what do I like about what I've been doing, what do I not like about what I've been doing, what suits me, what else could I learn, and then that has helped me figure out what that red thread is through my whole career. So the last time I did that big reevaluation was when I was looking to leave the World Economic Forum, and it was really about what is the red thread through my career, and it's really about either startup, turnaround, scale up. And so when I look back now, I didn't know it at the time, but when I look back at all those different steps in my career, that was the common thread.
Startup, scale up, turnaround. And it sounds so great, right? I mean, it sounds, wow, amazing. Like, if I can put that on my CV, I'm a startup, scale-up, turnaround specialist. It's like, yeah, that sounds amazing. But it took you a while to realize that's it. That's who I am. That's what I do. And then the other thing you mentioned, which I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about, I think we all have sort of these difficult moments sometimes where we have a dream and then the dream doesn't come to fruition. It doesn't happen. And sometimes it's particularly hard when it's outside of your own ability to do something about it. Somebody else had to accept you for the program that you applied to. They didn't do that. You still have that dream. You said something to me a while ago where you said, you know, at that moment when my dreams, let's say, were shattered, I realized that a setback could be turned, or that I could turn a setback into an amazing opportunity. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you came to that sort of insight because I think it can be valuable for all of us along the way if we ever experience a setback.
So I think it's really about learning the skills of self-reflection, and then this isn't something you learn once, it's something that you have to exercise again and again, and it's really about reframing. So there might be something that was a devastating setback, but if you actually think about it differently and you reframe it, it can be something that's incredibly valuable. And I think that the parallel piece to that people really struggle with is the idea of comfort with ambiguity. So I think I've been talking about this a lot with my team. There is a huge difference between being flexible, somebody tells me to do something different and I can just change tack and go do that thing, versus being really comfortable with ambiguity where you don't know exactly what the end result is going to look like. But you have your North Star, you know what direction you're going, you know the way in general that you're going to get there, but you've got pretty wide guardrails. And so you can just trust the system and trust the process and know that you're going to get there. And so that also takes the pressure off. It's not going exactly the way I thought, or I didn't anticipate that, or I didn't get that external validation. If you know where you're going, then you can be okay with that. And then you can just learn to flex along the way because you know you're still going in the direction that you want.
Yeah, it sounds good. I hope we can all do that when the moment is there. It sounds good in theory, but I suppose it's a little tough. But we take comfort in the fact that you were able to do that, and then that means that probably many of us will be able to do that. Maybe one final question, and I want to turn to the audience. I think we can all hear that you're American, and we know that you're American, but you've told us about your career, which has taken place for a big part here in Europe, and also of your studies, which were in Asia. Could you tell us a little bit about your global journey, across cultures, and how you were able to sort of adjust to building a career in all kinds of different countries and cultures?
Sure. So yes, I am American. I actually was born in Korea and adopted to the US. So I grew up in a family that was not a traditional white American family. There is no traditional American family. But my parents are white, my sister is black. It's a super multicultural.
You could be on those ad of Benetton or sure Ralph Lauren, I suppose.
Yeah. And then, yes, so I spent some of my education in the US, also the UK, also in Asia. And I think what I learned was the ability to listen and to really get to the heart of what people are saying and what the underlying needs are. And this goes back also to design thinking. Design thinking is all based on empathy and understanding the underlying needs and solving for the right thing. So I think that's really what has carried me through building this international career, is to not come with immediate problem solving. I know how to do this, let's just take action and go, but rather take the time, listen to people, spend a lot of time hearing what people have to say without creating judgment. And actually that is, I think, the key that will cut across any cultural norms, any of the visible structures when you move from place to place. It's really about human connections and listening and asking the right questions and taking all of that in before you take action, before you make judgment.
Maybe one final follow-up on that, because, you may know, but most of the people in the room here are probably not in their home country today. Right? They come from all over the world, and they're now in Germany, and their career might be in Germany. It could also be in another country in Europe, and could be another country in the world. So if you had to give sort of one advice about, the first time that you do that, the first time that as a professional you go abroad, or an anecdote, what would it be?
I would say leave your assumptions at the door. Probably all the assumptions that you make are going to be wrong, and there will be all kinds of things that you never thought of that are going to bubble up. So I think the best thing you can do is just go with a truly open mind, and I would say, it sounds a bit cheesy, but really an open heart as well, because that allows you to really connect with people and see what the opportunities are and see where you can add value.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your listening so far. Now, I want to make sure that we take a few questions from you for Cynthia. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I've got one here and one there, and then we'll come with the mic over to you, and then one person over there. So let's start with those three questions, and the mic, I suppose, is coming slowly coming our way. Okay, we'll take it from the back and we'll work our way forward. If you can please say your name, what you're studying, and then ask your question.
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Cynthia and Peter. My name is Wakar. I'm one of the MBA students here. Cynthia, it's wonderful to have the Innovation Foundation as one of the many in the universe of foundations out there. It sounds truly disruptive. What's your definition of impact? And I don't want to hear about the impact that works in the boardroom back at Zurich. What's the impact that works in Mexico? And sort of metrics that we as students here in this room could understand, please.
Thank you so much.
Impact is incredibly hard to measure, and there are years and years and reams of research about this. We've struggled with this a lot. So ultimately, we're going for systems change. We've got a theory of change. At the top of we use the pyramid-shaped one. So at the top of theory of change, of our theory of change, is that underserved populations will have better access to the world of work. And the two key things that need to change in that are people need to be more empowered and they need to be part of the system, and the ecosystems need to change to be more enabling. So we've boiled this down to several metrics that we think will cut across all of our projects. One is reach versus scale, because there is a tendency to just go for reach. How many people did you reach with that campaign? How many people signed up for your program? Reach doesn't mean that you changed anybody's life. So what we are calling conversion is actually levels of conversion. So somebody saw a campaign. Level 1 conversion is you went into that platform and you created a profile. Level 2 would be, you went through one of the assessments. Level 3 might be you actually then took the initiative to sign up for a class and you finished that class, or you got a mentor, or you did a work experience. And then level 4 would be on and on. So ultimately to maybe getting a job. That what we are working on right now is what are the right metrics that will work, say, in Mexico and will work in Spain and the UK and Germany and wherever else we go. But right now, that model of reach versus conversion, we believe will reach across that. The other piece is around partnership. And the kinds of partnerships and the quality of the partnerships that we create. And then the other thing that people generally don't measure is what are the secondary partnerships. So for example, in the Women Back to Work project, in the working group, we had this fantastic organization that specifically helps mothers in the UK to get off of unemployment and back into work. And then we had someone from the UK government. And they didn't know each other. They connected, and now they're in talks about could they do something together. We'd love to be able to capture those secondary collaborations, because that's part of how you create the exponential and the ultimately scalable impact.
That's amazing. So in summary, it's about conversion, partnerships, and secondary partnerships. I think that's a wonderful way of looking at it. Thank you for that. And then we had a question a little bit further down here on this side, and then yes, there we go.
Hi, thank you for being here today. I'm Jacques van Rensburg. I come from South Africa. My background is in political science and international studies. And I'm currently working with one of my former lecturers in South Africa on building a new thinking science called interdisciplinary thinking, a complete opposite to interdisciplinary thinking. Something that pushed me onto the path of this is my introduction to systems thinking, which really, really helped me innovate within my passions and finally understand the world in the way that I see it. So I'm curious, since you've mentioned a lot of thinking systems yourself, how has introduction to thinking systems changed the way you work with things and see things and analyze things throughout your career? Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, I love systems thinking.
Thank you. Oh wow, sure, yeah, go ahead.
Great,
this is great.
yeah.
We're back. We're back in person.
Yeah.
So I think the enthusiasm is warranted.
like
But
that.
go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah. No. So we're really careful within the Innovation Foundation not to be dogmatic about any particular methodology. So we use systems thinking really prevalently. We use design thinking, we use agile, and then we use bits and pieces of other things as well. What I like about systems thinking is I often explain it to people like a spider web. So everything is connected. If you pull something over here, you have to think about the 50 other things that are going to move. And that's often what is not considered. So we do a lot of looking at unintended consequences, scenario planning as well. So you think about if we, for example, with the young mothers, if we empower young mothers and they go back to work, there are examples from other countries about what happens when you empower women and they go back to work. You often see a rise in domestic violence. Sometimes you see a rise in child abuse. Sometimes you see a rise in divorce. So things like that you might not otherwise think about, because it's very easy to be reductive and say, oh, isn't it great that more women have work? So I think systems thinking is incredibly helpful. So I'm glad that you're using it.
That's amazing. And I know that for some others, maybe this is the first time that they've heard about it. These are incredibly powerful theories, systems thinking, design thinking, others. But it does take a little bit of education. We won't be able to talk about everything, but we got a nice introduction from the question and the answer. And then I think there was a final question over here, if I'm not mistaken, if we can still get to that. Yep, over there. If we can get the microphone. Sorry to make you do some extra exercise, but we're going to get there.
Thank you very much. I'm Anton. I'm currently a bachelor student of tourism, and I have a couple of questions about the company. So, what are your future projects and a plan of Innovation Foundation? And also, you mentioned that a government can be also a partner of the company. So, have you ever had the arguments with the state laws when you just were implementing the campaigns? And which tools that would be really interesting you implement for the analysis?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And you made sure that we didn't get 3 questions from 3 students, but 3 additional questions. We'll see if we'll get to it, because we're trying to be German in our approach here and stick to the time.
On the time.
But go ahead.
Okay. Quickly, in terms of the projects that we have, so the other 2 projects that are live are Women Back to Work, which is about mid-skill, low-skill women returning to work. Interestingly, that's actually focused on the hospitality industry right now, because hospitality lost a lot of people, has a need, because you have to be meeting a business need, and that could be an entry point for women coming back to work. The 3rd project is on older workers, 55 plus, and then we're using our methodology. We're looking at the other trends and who is likely to be excluded from work in the future. So we've looked at things like neurodiversity, we've looked at ethnic minorities, we've looked at indigenous youth, we've looked at people coming out of incarceration. So we just need to figure out where is a target audience that would have enough in common with the others so that it would be scalable. And then in terms of how we do the research, we have our own research methodology, our own research team, and then we work in partnership with lots of others. So we use a lot of different tools. We can talk about that separately if you want, to do that analysis. And a lot of it is trying to craft our own way of doing it, because not all of the existing tools are really fit for purpose for what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Well, and with that, time flies. We have already come to the end of our Learning for Leaders with Cynthia. So I want to make sure that we go to our second speaker. But before we do, I want to thank one final time Cynthia Hansen of the Innovation Foundation.
Thank you
so much. That was wonderful.
Pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.